Express once again, live from my home, and thank you for allowing me to come into your homes from mine. In this edition, again, we are 5 months to another major elections, and with any other elections that we've had in the fourth Republican Constitution history, we've had the threat of violence always forming a dark cloud over us. This year is no different, especially in the wake of the heated context around the new voters register. Already we've seen that the police have had cause to invite people who are alleged to have used threatening language, including words like we will kill each other. Now, there is a document, however, that those who crafted it believe could hold the solution to us having a violence-free elections on December 7th. That document is called the Roadmap to Eradicating Political Vigilantism in Ghana, and it was put together by the Peace Council, acting in concert with other agencies, and mainly was supported by the two main political parties. The NDC signed that document recently. The NPP had signed it before. That document, those who crafted it believe, holds what it takes to give us a peaceful election. Now, the roadmap is clear faces, has clear faces, timelines, benchmarks, and enforcement mechanisms which aim to progressively ending political vigilantism in our body politic. Additionally, of course, the National Peace Council has designed what they call a code of conduct for political parties in the lead up to this main elections. But the key question to ask is, especially on the back of the NDC signing it, that concludes the signing from those two parties. The key question to ask is, how do we enforce this, and will it work? How do you make it work? Especially with another major elections approaching, with the high stakes that we know it always brings. That is what we're going to assess tonight in quite some detail. You want to stay with us because, as you know, we've lost lives because of elections. And this document came out of such bloody events at Ayawaso West Wuogon, and we said never again. Now, this is the document that was supposed to make sure that never again becomes reality, together with a law that was passed early on last year. And so tonight, we're going to delve into that. I'm going to take a break. When I return, I will introduce my guests, and then we'll begin to unpack the issues as captured in the Roadmap to Eradicating Political Vigilantism in Ghana. Stay with me. And thank you very much for staying with me here on PMX. And apologies for our delayed start. It's obviously due to trying to make sure that the technology holds up for the next 40 minutes or so as we have this very important conversation as I come to you from my home with PM Express tonight. Hopefully, the technology will allow us to have an uninterrupted conversation for the next, 40 minutes. So bear with us. I mean, this is such an important conversation to have, and I'm delighted that I have been joined via Zoom also tonight by the Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, who is a chairman of the National Peace Council. I'm delighted that he could join us via Zoom. Also joining me tonight is Professor Kwesi Ening. Professor Ening is a Director of Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Also joining me tonight is Paul Nana Abrampa Mensa, who is the Senior Programs Officer at the CDD. All gentlemen have been central in putting together the roadmap to eradicating political vigilantism in Ghana. I'm grateful, gentlemen, for your time here on PM Express. Professor Ening, I want to start with you, and it's important that we are having this conversation on the back of the MPP primary. And if my reading is correct, the MPP primary will be the first major political event since the parties signed the roadmap. In assessing the way the primary was conducted, using it as a test for compliance when it comes to the roadmap, but also the code of conduct that it comes with, did the MPP comply, if you may, with the dictates of the roadmap?
Well, Evans, thank you very much. I think we need to separate the NPP as a party, probably not wholly, from its inability to control and discipline those who purport to share their principles, their norms, and their values. I'm not too worried about what took place on Saturday, because in the aftermath of the NDC signing, that is where we need to begin a process of public education, of engagement, and of selling the package for ordinary supporters of political parties to buy into it. This is where the real hard work begins. Let's not forget that over several decades, political vigilantism transmutating into militia has become a business. So this is almost a struggle between the forces of good, that is the values and principles inherent in the roadmap and the code of conduct, and those who have been long-term beneficiaries of silent violence. So I foresee some contestation going forward, but dedication underpinned by public messaging that is easy to digest and understand, of course, backed by the law, an ability and a willingness by the stakeholders identified in the roadmap to play the role that they are expected to play. But political party leaders also have a responsibility. And one would have expected a few more utterances of warning and of cautioning party members how to behave. But as I've said, this is the beginning of a long, difficult, sometimes a process that will retrogress, but we need to set our eyeball on the main target. A national politics devoid of violence, of destruction of property, and of threats to human lives.
Thank you, Prof. I want to bring in Mr. Abrampa. Mr. Abrampa, again, let's start with that same question, your assessment of how the primary went. Looking at all the effort that you've put in, did it give you some form of comfort when you looked at the outcome? Are you happy with the way it played out? Did you see some form of adherence to the contents of the roadmap?
Yes, good evening, Vance. Let me take the opportunity to say a very good evening to the Most Reverend Professor Asante and Prof. Ening and all our listeners. Yes, coming on the back of the background Prof. Ening has laid, we've just signed the roadmap and the code of conduct just last week or so by the NDC. So it's now a full document that has been assented to by the two leading political parties. As Prof. Ening said, the signing of the document is just one aspect. It is the document itself has structures for its implementation. My understanding, which Reverend will brief us more, is that the National Peace Council has already started fashioning out the implementation structures for it to take off. That also said, don't also let's forget that the roadmap and the code of conduct should be implemented alongside the Act 999, Vigilantism and Related Offences Act of 2019. Whilst the roadmap, the code of conduct seeks to work on the moral aspects of the political parties, the major stakeholders, to work towards disbanding vigilantism, the Act itself deals with the legal aspect of it. So we need to work the two together to make sure that we have a holistic approach in dealing with vigilantism. So using the MPP's primaries as a benchmark to assess whether implementation was effective or has started, I think we are not there yet because the structures have not started. If the structures were in place, I believe the National Peace Council will have people within the various districts and the regions to monitor infringements or the conformity to the documents.
Let me bring in Professor Asante then. Prof, thank you, and thank you for doing such a great work on this document. I know it hasn't been easy for you. We've seen this play out in the media, the disagreements, but finally, you managed to get it across the finish line. Talking about structures, now that both parties signed it, what next? What would it take to make this document implementable? As I've heard Abrampa say, you need some of the structures to be in place so that this can become a proper living working document. Where are we in trying to operationalize the content?
Yes, thank you very much. Let me also greet my colleagues who are with us in this discussion. I think, let me begin by saying that agreeing with all of them that the signing of the document itself is the beginning of things. One would be naive to think that the mere signing puts an end to the acts of political thuggery of vigilantism, that the way we put it. We believe that we have committed stakeholders into doing something that would put a stop to the whole political thuggery we call vigilantism. And what we, on our part, as the National Peace Council, seeks to do is to, we've already rolled up programs, and very soon you will hear about that, meeting with stakeholders to try and not only educate them in respect of what we have agreed on, but also to get them put in place structures that will ensure that the kinds of things that they have committed themselves to, they will be prepared to go by that. We had a board meeting a few days ago, and that was one of the things that we think we will be doing. We will be moving from place to place, institutions to institutions, because as you already know, the complexity of the issue means that you cannot limit it just even to the two parties alone. Other stakeholders are involved, the security and even the media and others are also involved in the whole thing. And we have put in place structures that will enable us go, meet with such institutions and go through what we have agreed on, so as to encourage people, use the moral suasion that we have to encourage them to abide by the rules in order that the Act 999 that Mr. Abrampa just cited will really be implemented.
Dr. Eni, one of the key things that I see in this document is that it puts the issues into phases. I want us to start by looking at phase one, which I guess will be very relevant for the 2020 elections. Phase one asks the NDC and the MPP to affirm their unconditional commitment to non-violence in political activities and undertake to execute immediately the tax set out below. And I want to just isolate a few of these important things. One is to take necessary steps to ensure that their members refrain from vigilante activities. Two is to undertake to cooperate with law enforcement agencies, especially by refraining from protecting their members who violate this. And then affirm their commitment to the Code of Conduct on Vigilantism. Now, you look at this in terms of the first phase, with the December elections approaching. What's your assessment in terms of what we need to do now so that these key milestones are adhered to by the political parties now that they've signed to it?
Well, thank you very much, Evans. I think one of the things we need to recognize right from the word go is that getting to yes, where we've gotten to now, has been like herding cats into one room in one direction. The 3 points you've raised that forms the crux of phase one is where we will see contentions within political parties themselves. That is the hawks and the moderates as to how much they should accede to these ideas and these phases. Refraining vigilantism is much easier said than done. Vigilantism has transmutated into a business, franchised, and like a monster is beginning to eat those who set them up. So for both parties, we are beginning to see a loosening of the control that political parties had over their boys and also over their girls. Because those who use this violence or have used it on behalf of political parties have noticed the inherent power that they have in applying that violence. So we will need the National Peace Council and other stakeholders as honest brokers in ensuring that there is a refraining from violence, that the identified groups, their members, their leadership, the groundswell of support of these groups must be convinced that violence is not the way forward. Cooperating with law enforcement also means that we need to stiffen the backbone of the police, that they wouldn't be intimidated, that politicians will not call them and threaten them, and that the police service itself would be willing and prepared to say, this is what the law gives us or permits us and allows us to do. The third one about the code of conduct. Codes of conduct are predicated on shared values and shared principles. And I think here the NDC, the MPs, the National Peace Council is on very solid grounds. Because none of our registered political parties affirms to or praises violence as a tool. And therefore, because they themselves cannot say that nor write that, the code of conduct becomes a powerful tool and a weapon in which political party leaders and their members must be encouraged to talk about, to make clear indications that they support it, they believe in it, and they want to abide by it. I am not too sure about the levels of disincentives that are both in the roadmap and in the code of conduct. But it will be crucial in the education phase, the public education phase, that we find ways and means of disincentivizing those who want to recruit, encourage, and to use violence. I don't want us right now to use what happened on Saturday as a benchmark. Let's get the education going for the next month or two. Let's ensure that people know about it in different languages. All kinds of methodologies and pedagogical tools are used. And then for those who flout those laws, or phase one, as Mr. Abrompa said, then we will let the law work. And that is when we will know whether politicians and the parties are willing and prepared to allow law enforcement and the judiciary to get the job done. But we need to get that job
done. Professor, and you raise a very important point I want to come to. It's about enforcement. And there were challenges. I guess what we can look to the primary to see what lessons we can learn in trying to operationalize the document. I want to play a video that we captured at one of the polling centers over the weekend that illustrates a problem that this particular document is trying to deal with. And Mr. Brampa, I'm sure you can see this video. I wanted to look at it and give me your thoughts on how, once we are able to operationalize, we educate, etc., how this document could fix such a problem. This is a video, and I'll ask my directors in the studio and to roll it on the screen so that we could all watch it in one of the constituencies there. Now you see in the video, if my producers could play that for us to watch, that in one of the constituencies you see a man wielding a machete and standing close to the ballot box. Our reporters who captured this tell us that one of the players, and you see the man there, the man is holding, the man in black, wielding a machete, swinging it up and down, close to the ballot box, wearing the face mask. What our reporters tell us is that what you see there, these gentlemen were put up to do this job, to protect the ballot box with a machete, by one of the interested parties in the primaries. Now, Mr. Brampa, clearly what we're watching is what the document is designed to deal with, to prevent and avert, including people could report this to the mechanisms that were going to be set up to enforce this. Give me a sense of how, what we're watching currently, how the document as we have it crafted is designed to deal with something like this at a polling station or across, really, the country during an election or before and after an election. In what specific ways is it designed to address a challenge as we are seeing on our screens?
Thank you very much, Evans. Yes, it's good you have these pictures for people who have not never witnessed some of these issues to see. For some of us who have been in elections fronts, especially by elections, some of these scenarios are not news to us, especially if you did observe what's happening if you went by election, you went to Tripoli, and these scenarios are not new. This is exactly what the document seeks to do. In fact, as Prof. Eni said, the document first phase tried to popularize the document, make its content known to the people, including, as Prof. Eni said, when you look into the history of vigilantism, no political party in the country has a branch that has officially in its structures as vigilante wing, as they have youth wing or women's wing. Mostly the research will tell you that they are formed by the hawks or individual elites within the political parties. But that does not also mean that the party structure is not aware of their existence or do not benefit from their services. So the document tries to deal with both the people who are used to perpetrate vigilantism and the people who hire their services or form them to be used. So in the initial stages, it's an education, and the education is going to make it clear as to the expected behavior in the code of conduct, not only for the political party executive, but everybody who has something to do with the political structure. If this fails, as we saw over there, that's where Prof. Eni said that each stakeholder that has been given a role to play in the roadmap then should be given a free hand, the independence that it deserves, the backing that it deserves to be able to implement the law. So, for instance, the man holding the machete over there, the pictures are clear. he's been identified. So it does not matter whether he's there alone, he's there by somebody. If the man is picked, then the party structure will tell us whether he was there for Nana Kwabena Abraham Pamensa or Profeni or Reverend Asante. The roadmap tackles it from the root cause. The person who is perpetrating, the person who formed it, the one who is hiring the services. So the roadmap is so comprehensive that it does not deal with only the person who is seeing the video. It traces the background as whoever is involved in the chain of perpetrating vigilantism. And if all these things do not hold, the moral aspect do not hold, then the Act 999, it's important the National Commission for Civic Education starts also popularizing the Act 999. What is most important, the Act 999, is that it gives severe palliative measures more than the criminal code that we have. So that itself will serve as a bit of deterrent to people who are not aware of the severity of the punishment in the Act 999. So that's why I said that the roadmap and the code of conduct and the Act will be used together. The National Peace Council, as you know, does not always go in the punitive measure. It also wants to use the moral solution. But it will not also, as the roadmap says, that in cases that people infringe the law, we should allow the legal system to deal with it. So this is a combination of the tools that are being used here. In fact, when we are able to apply both the roadmap and the Act, I think some of these things should be reduced.
Professor Asante, give me your comment on that, on the video that we've just seen, but also just on the same question of, because you led the process, how in the future this document attempts to deal with something like this, and in what ways it attempts to resolve it.
Thank you very much. Let me first of all tell you that exactly what we are seeking to do is what we are doing. One, exposure. And I hope that this is not just going to be something that is shown to the public, but the authorities that be, the New Patriotic Party, the police, and all the others will even act on this one. You know, it's not a question of saying that we are waiting for education to come about before we deal with this situation, because already this is captured. And I want to say that somebody should look at it and begin to act on it before it gets out of hands. But let me say, in support of what, to back up what Mr. Brampa was saying, the National Peace Council has come up with this kind of code of conduct and the roadmap to try and stop these very things that, the kind of thing that you are showing us in respect of somebody building that. You heard that it is said that somebody, a candidate, we don't know who that candidate is, it could be a candidate, and we don't know who that candidate is, but it's a candidate who did that. When we were doing this, when we were working on the document, even before we met with the NDC and the MPP on the vigilantism, Mr. Rampa, you remember we had this seminar, and one of the things that came out was that the problem does not even lie with the parties, but with the individual candidates, parliamentary candidates, who would always go around with certain people they will hire to threaten people in order that they will be able to get their way. And that's the reason why the code of conduct, it's also saying that the parties should really deal with such people, individuals who would, because the parties will say we don't have vigilantes, but whether you have vigilantes or you don't have vigilantes, individuals, they want to bring certain people to help them, intimidate people so that they will be able to have their way. The parties should deal with this kind of situation. The Act 999 also has something to say about such people. If somebody is caught doing that kind of thing, that person is bad, I think, from political activities for some time. And I think it is about time we begin to put, the Act is already in place. And whilst we are educating people, whilst we are trying to encourage the parties and the stakeholders to try as much as possible to abide by the rules that we have labored to put out there, we would also want to say that we would not just look at these things and close our eyes, turn it to the other side and say that, oh, we need to just educate them. What this person is doing there is illegal. And because it is illegal, I believe that the authorities, that be the law enforcement agencies, will act on it even before we start educating people on what they need to do.
Professor Enning, you want to have a quick bite at this?
Yes, I want to say something about this. And it's very simple. When you have a law, you have a roadmap, and you have a code of conduct, and somebody in public purview and in the presence of uniformed representatives of the state can boldly hold a machete and threaten other citizens of
Okay. I believe that we may have a challenge with Dr. Akin. We have it now. Oh, we don't? Okay. I mean, we're having a challenge with Dr. Enning's connection there on Zoom. I'm going to take a quick break. Hopefully when I come out, we can rectify that connection to him and get him to finish his point. And then we could look at a bit more of the code of conduct and then enforcement. Stay with me. And thank you for staying with me here on PM Express on the JoyNews channel. My name is Evans Mins. I'm coming to you from my home. As you can see already, my guests are also joining us from their respective homes as well. The beauty of technology. With me tonight as we look at a very important piece of document, first of its kind in the Fourth Republican Constitution, an attempt to eradicate violence from our body politic. As we approach an election again, it is more important now more than ever before. And I have Professor Kwesi Enning with me. I have Professor Reverend Asante with me, who is the head of the Peace Council, and he led the charge to pull this roadmap together. And I have Mr. Brampa with the CDD also with me. Professor Enning, the connection there wasn't favorable to you. You were making a very important point. So I will allow you to make that point, and then we can look closely at the code of conduct.
So let me just complete with what I was saying. When we sign on to documents as a state, in which everyone supports the driving thoughts behind it, it is critical for the sanctity of the state and its institutions that nobody flouts the inherent principles and ideas in those laws. So this character wielding the machete ought to be arrested and brought before a judge of competent jurisdiction. And I'm expecting the party to identify that individual who rented this quasi-criminal and to ensure that that person is expelled from Ghana's body politic. First, to send a clear signal to people, okay, that when you flout the law and challenge the authority of the state's regulations, that you will be dealt with and when necessary expelled from that organization. This guy there, the way he's swinging his left arm, will chop everybody down without any qualms. So how do we prevent such characters masquerading and demeaning the dignity of the Republic of Ghana? For 2020, there should be no uniformed official who is not tagged, name, number, clearly displayed so that we can identify those who flout the law and report them to the appropriate institutions. Two, even those who are armed, and we may need one or two of them around some of the police stations that have a contentious history, must be far away. They mustn't be near the box to intimidate people. But even more importantly, as we begin the process of educating the public, this is a great video for teaching people. This is a man ready to replicate Rwanda in Ghana if we get 500 of them. And I'm sure there are more than 500 of them. Okay, so in educating the public about the code of conduct and the roadmap and the responsibilities of political parties and the institutions identified, it is crucial that we see ourselves as playing a key role in the success of this peace accord, the roadmap, and the code of conduct. It is critical that every single Ghanaian plays a role and buys into this agenda, precisely because the allure of political money or access to public funds is so great that an individual will hide this character to come and threaten all of us. It must stop, and I'm expecting that within the next day or two, the Ghana Police Service will parade this character, take him to court, make sure that he's some criminal code of sorts is used to send a clear signal to people that we mean business this time round. Because if amongst brothers and sisters, we can hire such a character to come swinging his cutlass or his machete, what will happen when enemies clash? This should serve as a cautionary note to us, that when we talk about vigilantism as an unexploded ordinance, as an albatross, as a danger, as a threat, this is a visual example of that threat. A man ready to slaughter his fellow man for 50 cedis.
Professor Asante, let's talk about the code of conduct because it's such an important part of the roadmap. Some of the things that the parties sign on to, for example, parties who publicly denounce any acts of vigilantism, especially where the perpetrators are affiliated or associated and connected to the related political party, the parties who provide timely, accurate, objective, and this is a very important point, objective information regarding acts of vigilantism to the police, especially when such information is requested by the police. I read this and I wonder, this is impossible to implement in our body politic, knowing our history. What's your reaction to those who will be very skeptical that any of this can be enforced?
Well, let me tell you that that particular thing that you have read, as a context, before we even arrived at, the political parties themselves had agreed on 3 points. And it is out of that dialogue itself went on, and then we came up with this. Let me read to you some of the things they agreed on. And I'm sure you already have it because you made it known to the public, but just to remind, refresh our memories. The parties agreed significantly, both parties agreed to engage in deliberation aimed at 1, disbanding vigilante groups operating within political parties or for political purposes. They agreed that they would not entertain that within their own ranks. Secondly, prohibiting the ownership, hiring, or utilization of such groups by the political parties or members thereof, cooperating with state agencies and stakeholders in the total eradication of such groups or incidents of vigilantism in the country. And this was signed by the chairman of the two main political parties. The dialogue was aimed at that. And if you look at the roadmap and the code of conduct, it also concludes with the very things that we agreed on. Now the question is, you are asking, would they be able to do this? I'd like to believe that the people who came for the dialogue, the political parties, these are people who are our leaders, vying for the leadership of this country. I like to respect them. I like to believe that they knew what they were signing. They knew what they were talking about, and that they would really commit themselves to the very things that they themselves sat, discussed, and agreed on, and appended their signatures to it. So whether they will do it, will they do it? If we trust them to the extent that we are even prepared to give them the leadership of this nation to rule us, then we want to believe that they will be committed to the very things that they have, signed, they have committed themselves to, the roadmap, the code of conduct. They will be willing to work towards the eradication of vigilantism in this country. And as we make it known to the public, we are doing so that the public will know what their leaders, the political party leaders and stakeholders have committed themselves to. So that if tomorrow somebody gets up and is behaving otherwise, is behaving differently from the very things that he has committed himself to, we will know the sort of people or the sort of person that the individual is. So for me, I want to believe that they are decent people. They are people who know what they are on about. They are people who are vying to rule us, and therefore they are people we can trust. They are people who will be committed into ensuring that the very things that they have committed themselves to, they will do it. We, on our part, will do what we can also do. I mean, given the complexity of the vigilante issue, we have said that it's not just the two parties alone that can do that, but they have a role to play. I have a role to play. The media has a role to play. The police, they have a role to play. And we want to believe that they would do the very things that they have committed themselves to.
Clarify this for me. I mean, just as I was listening to you speak, are you suggesting or saying that the public, the voting public, will ultimately hold the rod in punishing political parties who violate the terms of the code of conduct they themselves signed on to? Is that what you're hoping will happen?
I'd like to, the country to come up to that position where we will hold our leaders responsible for the very things they commit themselves to and the things that they do. And that's the reason why there is the need for us to go around educating. And the media, you have a role to really, and that's exactly what we are doing, to educate the public so that the public will hold them responsible for going contrary to the very things that they have committed themselves to do.
Mr. Abrampa, I want to bring you in on this question. Are you, what's the expression? Are you confident that the way the code and the roadmap has been structured has enough deterrence in it to exact compliance from the political parties in a way that will make this document beneficial in the long run to us the way it was anticipated it will be?
Yes, the agreement to commit to the code of conduct and the roadmap was voluntary by the two leading political parties in the country. The processes leading up to fashioning out the two documents was all-encompassing. In fact, it was a demand by the two parties to enlarge the committee or the stakeholdership that should sit down to plan these documents. As Prof said, ahead of reaching these agreements or finalizing the documents, the two political parties had signed communique that spelled out their commitment to the processes and as to what they wanted to do. And if you did follow the signing, especially the last one that was signed, the speech by the chairman and the general secretary of the NDC as to their commitment and what they expect the NPP and the government itself to do. So it's a voluntary commitment that they are centered to. And don't also forget, Reverend Asante said something that the vigilante groups have turned out to torment the people who put them in place. And in fact, when you go to some places and during our research, they will tell you whenever they are going to their party offices and they saw 3 or 4 youth gathered there, they run away because they don't know what is in store for them. So it's something that is begun to torment all of them, and we needed a playing ground to solve it. But what was hindering was the suspicion that if I do disband my groups, the other may not do it. But now that they've come into agreement on one accord, I think both parties are going to commit to it. And as I said, the roadmap and the code of conduct are just in support of existing law. If the Peace Council would not like the country to be so litigant, that it is a peace council, it wants a mutual coexistence, it will dwell on moral solution, but you disrespect the accord that you've wasted the Peace Council's time to put in place, then the Peace Council will have no option, or the institutions in charge will have no options than to apply the legalities which is embodied in the Act 999. And people don't actually know the provisions in the Act 999. The severity of the punishment in there is nowhere comparable to the criminal code. So if people begin to understand this, then I think the safest way for them to abide by the tenets is to go by the code of conduct and the roadmap. So based on 3 things: one, because the parties committed to the process and they themselves invited the National Peace Council to mediate for them, I think they will go by the integrity and the commitment that they've made. 2, if they refuse to go by that, not only the public will accuse them, there are other stakeholders who have been given roles in the roadmap. The NCC is there, the Small Arms Commission, the police service is there. They are also not going to allow the country to be generated, so they are also going to act. And the last one is that the Act 999 was to be enforced. So I believe, as Prof have said, because they've committed to it, because there are specific provisions in the code of conduct and the roadmap that they're expected to follow after the structures have been put in place. For instance, we have a structure of national committee to oversee the implementation, replicated in the regional and the district level. If anybody flouts it, it's going to report it. And apart from the naming and shaming, the security agencies will know whoever did it because the structure is there. So I believe even there's enough provisions in the structures proposed that when implemented, people will be forced to commit to it.
I mean, Professor Eni, do you trust the political parties to comply because they signed to it?
Far from it. No. Let's get something very clear. The public and the political parties don't have prosecutorial powers. The political parties must be held to account by the institutions that we have established and empowered to act. When those institutions fail to act, just as we have seen this character swinging his machete, even the dog is afraid to go near him. Look at the dog. It's even running away. Okay, then we would not get to the bottom of them. So allowing political parties whose individual members profit from the violence that they unleash on ordinary people to turn around to find disincentives not to misbehave is, I think, being too kind to them. So let political parties behave based on the principles inherent in their in their manifestos. They failed that since 1949 with respect to vigilantism. But let's empower the police, the judiciary. Let this man not swing his arm by poking it into our eyes as Ghanaians. Okay? When those who attacked courts in Kumasi were fined with what, 1,500 cedis, then no roadmap or code of conduct will work. Okay? To ensure that these things do work, let us please use the law, let's use the institutions, and then let us punish. If this man is punished, it will serve as a deterrent. But let the punishment be swift and according to the rules and the laws of this country.
Professor Inning, I'm grateful that you could join me. Professor Reverend Emmanuel Asante, thank you very much. And of course, we are partners in this. We started our own campaign last year on this. And so call on us anytime, and we are ready to partner to help make these elections better than before in terms of ridding it of violence. Mr. Brumper with the CDD, thank you also. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your evening.